So in the last lesson, we talked about sending data over to the server. So what we do need to do, also include in our AJAX request, is something to handle that if we do have a server request and we're able to receive information from the server. And that's what this is doing over here. This is just checking and receiving that information and catching that data that's being returned from the server. So over here we're doing the send of the data over to the server, and again this comes into why we're using true and asynchronous, because we're looking for it to, when it finishes loading, then it's going to know to run the readyState change function, and this is what's going to be included here. So if the readyState equals 4 and the status equals 200, then we output this. And what readyState change means is that this actually stores this function, and whenever the readyState does change, so once this is stored within JavaScript, so it goes through and it reads all of this and it says, okay, well, once this readyState function, once it actually does change, we're able to run this function. So it remembers that and it knows that it's going to execute that, but only when the readyState is true. And also it's important to remember that every time this readyState changes, that this will actually run that function. So whenever there is a change in this readyState, this function will actually run. And so when we go over here and we see readyState equals 4, and we're checking the value of readyState, and now that when it does equal 4, we're actually able to know that we've got a response, that the response has been completed, and that we're able to get our data. And that's why over here we're setting that inner HTML to our response text. And again, this is the AJAX request information. So I've added in a console here, console log out of AJAX request, just so we have a better idea of what's happening here. So again, once that readyState changes, then it's going to fire off this function and run this code, and part of the code now is going to be console log. So we'll be able to show you what's actually coming out within this form data. So until there's some interaction or until the function is run, we're actually not seeing any of the anything within console. So when I do run the function, we see that we do have this XML HTTP request, and we've got our returned information. So here we've got our response, we've also got our response text, here we've got the response URL, and this is that status that we're looking for. So status of 200, and we've got our readyState function. So again, this is a function that whenever it changes, and we can see here there's very minimal information here, but there's a function scope there and some additional information that we're not going to really get into, but it's just important to remember that this is a function as opposed to something like response text, and this is just returning that string value, as well as status text. It's okay. So this just gives us some feedback about what's happening with this XML HTTP request value. And our readyState, again, it's 4. So this is why we're looking for a readyState of 4, and that just means that we know that it's been completed, and we know that status equals 200 means that it's a success. So if you don't want to have it on success, if your server is returning something other than some status values, so if you've got like a 400 or whatever you're setting that to within the server, you might want to look at different options for this as well. But we're just looking at a default of a success here and a successful readyState of 4. And that's all that means is we're just taken back and we're seeing that there's some data that's actually being returned here. And again, this can also get really customized as well, and you can look at the different statuses, whether success or failures and or errors, and you can output the data accordingly. So here we do have what happens when these two pieces of criteria are met. So when readyState equals 4 and status equals 200, we're going to document get element by ID result, and that's this element, and we're just changing that inner HTML, and we're loading in again that AJAX request, so the same thing that we've got in console log here, and we've got our response text. And so when we go back out to our console, you see that what we're doing is we're loading this returned information. It needs to be more than 3 characters. And that returned information will change. So now when we go down, you can see how many different requests have been made. And here we're seeing that the responses are changing. So all of these should be sending back that status 200 when we do have some response text there. And again, you can pull out any one of these values and use them. So if you want to see what the response URL is, if you want to log that, or if you want to write that somewhere, you could pull that out as well.